Doodletones is a name that many, if not pretty much all of y'all watching this video have never even heard of, while those in the know are more familiar with her recent heinous activity in the hellspawn corner of the internet known as the art commentary community, opening up here with the reveal that she's a transgender diaper shitting fetishist who has a knack for involving children in her corners of the internet. Well, I feel that's a good example of the type of degeneracy we're about to get into. However, she isn't just a recent case that popped up on my radar out of the blue, as it turns out that Doodles here has had a history dating back over a decade ago that really shows where this depraved and disgusting rabbit hole started. A rabbit hole that started with the face some of y'all might recognize. Say hello to Mr. Mediker, formerly known as Internet Aristocrat and better known by his real name Jim, an internet figure who's been around for well over 2 decades at this point and a former member of the infamous Mediker troll site back in the late 2000s. Jim was just one of many trolls on the site who would use it to make fun of people online. The classic slew of people like furries, bronies, gross degenerates. Hell, H-Bomber Guy. Yes, that H-Bomber Guy. The YouTuber known as this leftist, politically charged man was a full-blown old-school internet troll and active user of the site before it shut down, with him clearly having a case of perhaps the most severe form of trolls remorse I've ever seen. But that's besides the point. The point here is that Jim loved to make fun of freaks online, and it just so happened one day when making a video on his Mr. Mediker channel that he found himself some new targets to go after. Now in summer 2016, Jim would start a new series making fun of degenerates on DeviantArt and going over the various crazy things you would see on that site such as inflation and giantess fetish artworks. However, by episode 3 he would already run into issues as soon after it was released it would get falsely reported and taken off YouTube for a short moment in time. It turns out that he covered the baby fur fetish, basically furry lolicon or Shotokan cub art, and some really nasty shit indeed, in which a group of those people take advantage of YouTube's report system and spam it up to get it taken off the site. However, it wasn't just these baby fur freaks that caught Jim's attention from all this. It was also a certain somebody who made a video on him that would kick everything into gear. On August 30th, 2016, Doodletones would release her video, Kink Shaming Isn't My Fetish. A quick 7-minute dive basically saying that Jim is mean to people online and they don't deserve to be made fun of even if their fetishes are completely and utterly degenerate. It's a pretty shit video all things considered, with the opening literally being Doodletones claiming they're asexual, which already raises red flags, as why would somebody need to come out with that as the opener on a topic like this unless they got their own weird shit going on.
So let me get one of the more fun questions out of the way. What is my sexuality? I consider myself to be asexual, as sex, I guess you could say, kind of disgusts me to a certain extent, or rather the idea of having it turns me away.
The rest of it is just really stupid rebuttals that basically dumb down to, bro, just don't look it up, and calls Jim a kink shamer whilst getting pissy about it, and it seemed that things were destined to be just another stupid 18-year-old transgender woman getting mad because someone made fun of not even them, but other people unrelated to them. Well, I just lied to y'all when I said it was people unrelated to them, because it turns out that after Jim discovered Doodle's video that there was a reason she opened up with her awkwardly proclaiming she's asexual. Jim would delve into this on episode 7 of his Hurtbox Chronicles series in early September, in which he reveals that this random internet nobody who tried to defend these inflationists and baby furs is a diaper-loving degenerate themselves to nobody's surprise, adding some closure to the question on why the fuck anyone would defend those freaks online.
What could possibly have made your grandmother think you have a mental illness? Oh, is it that? ABDL, Adult Baby Diaper Lover Role-Playing Group? Doodletones, or should I call you by your proper name? Doodle Diapers. Doodle Diapers, do you get off on shitting yourself? Is that what this is about? Were you upset that there's a potential that I may end up doing a video on diaper shitting?
The grandmother making them quit their Doodletones account and having to move to a second one is just the icing on the cake here, but some people wonder just how bad was the stuff she was drawing? Well, it's some pretty nasty shit, no pun intended, such as a drawing of her character Susie pissing herself in a big-ass diaper after someone asked for it, and another of a short comic of a dude shitting himself. Not a fetish and totally asexual, by the way. It's no wonder Grandma rightfully understood she's mentally ill, because it's pretty obvious at a first glance. Her journal entries are also pretty funny to read because it sounds like a teenager who just barely started to understand the concept of critical thought. It's just that Doodletones here will put that effort into things like getting mad that DeviantArt allowed gory drawings but cracked down on fetish art involving piss and shit, clearly showing this person was too far gone down the pipeline and was far beyond the point of no return. There's even this one journal entry where she starts off saying how fetish art can be uncomfortable for some people, which like, yeah, duh, of course. But as you're reading it, it's clear she's just ranting about people making fun of her diaper fetish, making it obvious she's just mad people rightfully make fun of people like her. Did I mention a lot of these posts also came out before she was even an adult and was still a teenager at the time? Yeah, It was clear they were already a lost cause because once someone gets like this at such a young age, it's usually pretty over for them, and it's unfortunately a sad reality that is all too common these days online. Now, after the video dropped, there was still a little bit extra that people would discover, such as how Doodles had a habit of denying she has a diaper fetish by claiming that they only support the fetish rather than actually being into it themselves, something that is very obviously a lie, and them knowing that admitting they have a diaper fetish will cause people to make fun of them some more. So they hide behind this weird pseudo admission to try and skirt by that crowd, an admission that only the stupidest of people would fall for. She would even vaguely threaten her own life as she kept getting comments from people calling her a disgusting degenerate freak on Twitter, but nothing came from this and she eventually got over it. It was still pretty funny to see her try again and again to tell people she definitely didn't have a diaper fetish and only supported it, however, but it's just more the same denial we've gone over, so you just can't help but laugh and move on. However, it will continue to get worse as people go through Doodle's comments on DeviantArt and find her doing crazy shit for everyone to laugh at. The one on screen, for example, takes place literally 4 days before her rant video on Jim, in which she and some dude named South Park Artist 135 engaged in diaper roleplay together. At one point, Doodles even asked the guy to transform him into a girl in the middle of this diaper roleplay, adding just that little extra juice to the story going on here. There was this one interesting site note that Jim mentioned in his video of some old commentary database that Doodles would constantly update about whatever stupid drama that she was in or knew about, in which none other than infamous ACC Gooner Just a Robot was one of the many people she got into a pissing match with way back in 2015. Also, as she continued to move on from this, she would get into various dumb fights in the comments whenever people would call her content trash, showing that she had this severe inability to just ignore her haters, but that's not really too interesting at the end of the day here. What is interesting is looking back into that DeviantArt account, however, the one that her grandma made her quit and had to make a new one, in which people would find an example of the glorious time diaper in D-diaper, with the time when making people whatever age they want at the cost of becoming a bedwetter, and the D-diaper basically being the best one the diaper fetish lover in denial could ever dream of. Given the post is literally called My Contributions to the ABDL Community, it's just more examples of the sheer dysfunction of Doodle's brain going on here, but you'll get that point by now. It somehow even gets worse as people would find a diaper roleplay where she had to explicitly state the girl's age could physically be no higher than 8 for some strange fucking reason, with the implication behind that given the context of her entire existence being rather distressing to think about. I mean, dude, she was literally trying to insert her diaper fetish into roleplays knowing that people weren't into that shit. That's how degenerate Doodletones is. And the fact she was a teenager doing all this is again just really sad to think about. After moving to SD the Doodler after Grandma discovered her secret, Doodletones would decide to turn the time and D-diapers into roleplay world-building pieces, with this July 2015 roleplay involving a school opened up for diaper-dependent children as part of their uniform, with the time diaper now having a notable downside that students are not allowed to turn below the age of 13. Again, the implications going on here are just so fucking insane to think about, but besides all that, it was clear that Doodletones was destined to be remembered as just another random online degenerate and one of the most famous examples of the type of people that Mr. Mediker made content on back in the day. Even one of her friends defending her, Dylan Thomas, couldn't help sway public opinion in their favor, meaning this entire little situation was just that, a small inkling into the world of degeneracy that would be forgotten in a few years. Except that wouldn't be the case here, as Doodletones was one persistent motherfucker who wouldn't let any of this deter her from making content online, and in fact, she would end up finding herself part of a brand new community in her journey to move past all this. Now before, during, and after this whole spat with Mr. Mediker, Doodletones was an integral figure in what is known as the slideshow commentary community, also known as the SCC. These are the people who popularized the usage of character stills and sprites within their content in the early to mid 2010s, usually doing the typical commentary stuff alongside it for that extra zing to their content. Whilst there aren't really any notable creators within the scene as it was and continues to be extremely tiny and niche, the usage of character stills to represent oneself in a video would be the thing that caught the attention of outsiders due to its useful nature and overall content branding, with many creators outside the SEC such as the aforementioned Just a Robot, Digby the Goat, and Spoctortech taking inspiration from the influence they started and using it within their own videos to much success. In fact, it was Doodletones working on a video about Spoctortech that would be her first real foray into the art commentary community. You see, back in early 2018, about a year and a half after the Mediker beef, Spoctortech was falsely accused of being a pedophile by a handful of people who just lied on his name for some reason. Oh yeah, by the way, he was a 17-year-old minor when this happened as well. I know, it's some insane shit, but that's besides the point, as for some reason people in the ACC ran with the news to ruin his life despite the evidence being lacking, and so a member of the scene named Aristocratic would make a multi-video series breaking everything down and proving those accusing him are fucking insane and malicious liars. All these videos have barely just under 1 million views, and if I'm not mistaken, one of them did pass that threshold, and given Doodletones was one of the many people who helped research and even allegedly edit parts of the videos that Ponder released, it was obvious that she was one of the many people who helped clear his name at the time, and so she would become close to the upper echelon of the ACC despite being a very random tiny nobody to the public eye. However, it was in the midst of all this that some members recognized Doodletones was that diaper-loving degenerate freak that Jim made fun of over a year ago. And so in a Thanksgiving special posted in November 2018 when replying to some random DeviantArt hater, Doodles would answer some of their questions, but in the process would just straight up lie to people.
Doodle denies having a diaper fetish, even though the evidence is written in stone.
Alright, so let's go back down this alleyway as much as I don't want to. To have a fetish in the way that Jim was accusing me, he'd have to prove that I am sexually aroused at the idea of wearing diapers, which he can't. He did provide evidence that I was in an ABDL roleplay group, but that on its own doesn't prove that I was active in it, much less am turned on to the idea. Oh, but if you're in the group, then you must like it enough to get off to it, I hear the peanut gallery saying. To that I say, no, not inherently. Especially when even in the video I explain that fetishism fascinates me infinitely. However, fetishes are things that infinitely fascinate me, as I find it to be interesting to see where the weird of the world begins and how far it goes. I will say there are some I enjoy more than others, certainly though.
Even despite the evidence being a whole lot less than what we went over after Jim made his video, it was still pretty clear that Doodles has a diaper fetish, but for some reason in her deluded head of hers would say there's no proof of that online. Now, I have no idea why she would lie about something so easy to prove wrong, but it shows you just how willing she was to not accept defeat and how easy it is for her to lie about something if she knows she can get away with it. In fact, the reason she was able to get away with it not only was just lying, but also because she was such a tiny nobody that nobody of any stature cared to look into the lies, and those bigger and very influential ACC figures would protect her by stating it was just random innocent artworks taken out of context. Now, I know a lot of degenerates hung around these ACC circles back in the day, so I understand the reason on why Doodles was able to integrate herself into the community. It's just funny to see a place where the weirdest of the weird all gathered together because it made it easy to point at them and laugh. However, that's besides the point, as the weirdest part of the video is when Doodles admits that more evidence has been brought to the table and now admits that an argument can be made that she's a diaper-loving freak, but she literally just denied being a diaper-loving freak, so what the fuck does this statement even mean?
So this evidence written in stone that Medicare plastered in his video is fairly flimsy at best, to be honest, and it doesn't prove that I have a diaper fetish. Now, other people brought to the table extra evidence to give an argument, and while I know the truth and that I don't, other people seem to think otherwise, and I do understand that there's now an argument to be had, so I don't vehemently argue with it nearly as much as I used to, you know, let people believe what they want to believe at this point.
It's clearly one of those admissions without outright saying it kind of moments, Freudian slip if you must, because admitting an argument can be made you have a diaper fetish is basically admitting it full stop. She just won't say it outright because of her ego or because she knows it can make her look bad. Now, as Doodles will continue to build her reputation within the ACC and make friends with notable figures outside of Pondersprocket like Hopeless Peaches, Loud Convoy, yes, that Loud Convoy, and even former rival Just a Robot, that dirty diaper was still hanging over her head, as while the big figures waved it off or refused to talk about it for the most part, you still had those who knew about the diaper shit and basically just wanted her to admit she's a degenerate freak. Hell, even former Doodletones fan and certified gooner Turkey Tom would chime in on her Kiwi Farms thread and call her fucking cringe, a far cry to his original take on her just a couple years earlier.
But, as always, this does not mean that I hate all commentary channels in this genre. In fact, I can think of a few good channels like Doodletones that do a pretty good job.
With this vocal minority still annoying her, Doodles would again talk about all this in a 3.5-hour video in summer 2020, basically just ranting about her life since being a little kid for the whole runtime because she felt like it. After about an hour and a half of meandering on and boring information that no one cares about, she finally gets into her DeviantArt activities, in which she reveals that one of her big fetishes is transformation, so much in fact that a lot of her art and artworks revolve around this fetish in particular, and given her transgender identity, oh boy, the implications surrounding this are so palpable I ain't even gonna get into that.
2013, though, was when I found out what fetishes as a whole were and what some of the different fetishes are. Transformation in particular was the big one I found, and so I learned the subsets of age regression, TG, anthropomorphism, started up a transformation poker game where people chose 5 cards in a suit that dictated what kind of transformation they were going to get. People played it for a bit until it lost steam. I wanted to make a transformation card game, and shortly after a DeviantArt game. Both went nowhere. I did a Pick My Poison series of transformation pieces. I wanted to make a transformation roguelike. That went nowhere.
Doodles then gets into how they used to do a bunch of transformation and other fetish roleplays like we've already seen. But then when getting into why she moved onto her second DeviantArt account, she lies to the audience by stating her grandma made her do this because of the vent art she was making was showing her going through a rough time in life, not because of the nasty ass fetish stuff she found instead.
With this in mind, during 2015, my grandmother started picking up using a computer and wound up learning about how to specifically browse DeviantArt, and was told the name of mine and my little brother's accounts. And as you can probably guess by now, when she found my account, there was a lot of concerning red flags due to the stress levels I was having at the time, and from specifically my vent art from 2013, 2014, and even some in 2015, caused my grandmother to worry about me maybe having some sort of mental disorder. Now, I've never been officially diagnosed with more than partial red-green color blindness.
I shouldn't need to go into detail on how this is a blatant lie because the obvious is already there, but it doesn't matter much as a few minutes later, Doodles inadvertently admits this was a fetish by the way she speaks about him in general.
I will state fully that I do not regret getting into looking at the fetishes I got around to looking at, as this helped me understand and sympathize with people to a certain degree. You're free to try and skewer me for that all you want, but we all grow at different rates and utilizing different methods of learning.
Right there is her admitting that the transformation, diapers, and everything else was indeed a fetish of hers, but for some reason she would keep denying it publicly, likely because she doesn't like people making fun of her for it. It took her almost 4 years to somewhat admit this is all a fetish to her and not this weird pseudo-investigatory, oh, I'm just interested in these people guys, haha type shit that she had been selling to people since the Medicare beef. With this information now out to the public, those who still cared about her diaper fetish stuff felt a small sense of vindication for being right the entire time. Though saying she was still a notable figure in ACC, they would continue to clown on her for being a complete degenerate freak because she was still around on the internet. However, despite being a well-known figure by this point, it was in late 2023 where the ACC started to fall apart after years of various dramas started to pile up, stuff you could get more info on in this video I made on screen when you get the chance, and so it seemed like Doodles was next on the chopping block. In fact, she indeed was one of many people getting called out, but this time instead of just lying and denying she was ever into diaper shitting roleplays, she would implement a tried and true classic narrative that people on this side of the internet love to use when backed into a corner. On February 24th, 2024, Doodletones would release a video talking about that weird-ass roleplay she did on DeviantArt where she pretended to be an 8-year-old after ACC member Madlibs made a couple tweets calling them out for it the night prior. Forget the video thumbnail being her drawing out a part of this nasty-ass roleplay for some strange fucking reason. We're here to see what else she has to say about this whole situation because now that notable members of the ACC were learning about what she did, she knew she had to try and control the narrative before it was too late. Now that she's admitted this was indeed a fetish she was into back in that 3-hour video, she would now add a new layer to this entire mess. You see, Doodles didn't get into the fetish on her own accord, no. It turns out that she was actually now groomed into this nasty shit by a 26-year-old man named Alex that she met on Skype back in November 2014 when she was just 17 years old herself.
You might also have the very real argument of Doodle was groomed into it. And for like a decade, I didn't even realize that I might have been until going through my old Skype logs earlier this month. I don't know where this person is at now, so I suppose this is just for peace of mind at this point and to help contextualize things a bit better, but the same year that I got super into erotic roleplay, I met this person called White Clouds 1988, also known as Alex. We used to chat a lot with each other, and when I say chat a lot, I mean we chatted a lot. We met November 22nd, 2014, so remember I was still 17 at this time. Alex here was, according to their profile, 26 at the time, so a year younger than I am now as of this video. They knew I was as young as I was at the time too. In fact, they said that I was cooler than they were at that age. It was one of the first conversations we had. That same day, I was also allowed to trauma dump on them about my rampant suicidal ideation, and they were allowed to just casually talk about the time that they tried anal while talking with me about asexuality. We then got onto the topic of diapers, as that was the circle that we met each other in.
You just heard her admit right there at the end that she met this guy in a diaper fetish group, meaning that Doodles wasn't groomed into this fetish, she already had it, and trying to push it onto a guy, while it's certainly a fucking creep given he's talking to a 17-year-old like this while being 26 himself, is just a blatant lie to feign accountability for being into this nasty diaper shit. Now, there is a very real possibility that her interactions in these fetish groups as a child could pertain to some form of grooming, but she wasn't groomed into this diaper stuff specifically through this guy Alex like she wants people to believe. She's just using him as a scapegoat because she knows that people in the ACC wouldn't dare question someone claiming they got groomed, as it's a very strong get out of jail free card that some insane people try to pull off on that side of the internet whenever facing heat. Now, the reason I'm so confident that I know there was no chance Doodles was groomed by Alex is actually quite simple. You see, Dylan Thomas, that friend of Doodles who defended her from the Medicare beef way back in the day, has since become a hater of Doodles after they had a falling out. He'd also end up compiling a decade's worth of information pertaining to her in a gigantic 300-page Google Doc, and in said document there's this one screenshot from September 2014, 2 months before she met Alex, where she answers someone asking how she got into the diaper fetish stuff by saying it was looking for hypnosis files to become more feminine and falling down that rabbit hole. So, 2 months before she met Alex, she was already admitting to being into diapers, so her current story saying that she was groomed by him into it is a complete and utter lie. There's no reason to lie about this because she already admitted she's into diapers almost 4 years ago now, yet she thought by using this rhetoric that she could inch her way out of it, but instead she gave her haters even more of a reason to keep looking into her because she is very clearly a pretty manipulative person and was using the ACC's lack of research skills and overall naivety to push the blame onto others. Now, the reason Doodles came out with this video lying to everybody wasn't just because of that Mad Libs person calling her out. It was also related to a Discord server called the FCK being leaked out to the public. To make a long story short, the FCK was a server made way back during the Madame drama when it went down in the ACC in 2019, in which it ended up turning into a complete degenerate hellhole where minors are sent porn and groomed by adults, with all this being revealed in late February 2024. It's some pretty sick shit, and there was a bunch of fallout involving notable members in the ACC at the time, such as Hopeless Peaches, and so with this news coming out to the public, people within the scene will start to comb through the logs for any more damning information. One of those people was Doodletones, as at the time, nobody was questioning her false grooming claims because she managed to skew public perception in her favor, and also because she was a notable member of the scene who was trusted enough to take a look into the logs. Now at first, it just seemed like a typical investigation into another degenerate corner of Discord, nothing entirely new, but then things will start to get a bit shifty and throw a couple people in for a loop. You see, Doodles would make a video in March that year where she admits she was part of the server at one point in time after people discovered messages she sent, but states that she wasn't very active and so didn't know about the degenerate shit that was going down. However, a message from all the way back in October 2020 shows people talking about one of the members who would send porn to minors, in which Doodles chimes in on the conversation, clearly meaning she read those messages and knew that minors are risking the server. As we already know, minors within the server did end up getting groomed, and so seeing that Doodles knew this was going down yet was now pretending to never know about it, it was clear that things are starting to get out of her control as the truth is starting to slowly come out to the public. In fact, it was someone who was looking into the logs themselves named Lakamoka Laka who would happen to get Doodles into a call alongside other FCK members. Laka would start to question Doodles knowing that she knew that minors are being groomed, in which things would get out of Doodles' control very quickly.
Just wanted to make sure of your awareness of the situation because I just want to verify things first. So you were aware that they were a sex pest.
Yes.
Beyond what happened, like, was there anything else you were aware of their behavior at the time? Like, were you aware of what was going on their channels, or no? Okay.
No. I had dipped in like May when I figured out that they were kind of being excessively weird around children.
Well,
I think that was around the time. I want to say that was around the time that Gal released their video.
Okay, so you dipped around that. When was this? Do you know the date?
I think. I stopped posting in there May 23rd, 2020. So somewhere around there.
Now, I have to ask a follow-up question because you just said, like, you were aware of the posting, like, you just said that. Why?
I think that was the reason I did. But yes.
Oh, okay. If you think that was the reason, I have to ask, like, why was no further things done afterwards? If that was the reasoning, because this is a question I do want to ask Nezzy as well. If you're aware of the children being harmed in that, like, being affected in that way.
Nezzy,
like, no.
Nezzy did do stuff about it.
Oh, I know, but I'm asking, like, after you guys left, why wasn't anything further done? Because you guys are aware that this stuff can have effects on children. I'm wondering
well, because
why
the
wasn't
stuff that the stuff that I heard about that Toasty was doing was in an entirely different chat.
Well, fair
and
enough.
I wasn't in that chat.
Yup, not only did Doodletones lie about the time leaving the server, she knew that the Toasty guy was acting sexual with minors and that being the main reason she left, yet for almost half a decade never once told anybody about what was going down for whatever the reason may have been. It's very likely she just saw how fucked everything was and dipped out and tried to put it all behind her, but by not even giving other people the information about what was going down and letting them take control of the whole situation, she inadvertently, whether she would like to admit it or not, did lead minors down a bad path.
Yeah, no, it's like I guess if you were asking, yeah, if you're trying to ask me, like, why I didn't do, like, this large-scale investigation on Toasty, yeah, I wouldn't have known what to do at the time. Like, this was, like, 4 years ago, and I definitely didn't have any, like, experience in situations like this. I wouldn't have known what to do. Obviously I had dipped. A handful of other people had dipped. We were all kind of like very against Toasty just collectively. I didn't know anyone who kept in contact with them after this point. So
Okay.
I don't
Just
really
so we can
know
verify
what
ages.
more there was.
Because I know Nezzy was 19. How old were you at the time?
I was 23.
Yeah, at 23 years old, she didn't know how to, at the very least, inform somebody else about what was going down in that degenerate hellhole so they could take care of it? Sure thing, buddy. Soon after this news came out that Doodletones, one of the people looking into the FCK, was not only in the server, but knew the degenerate things that were going down and knew that kids were getting groomed, people started to put it together pretty quickly in their heads. Doodles joined the investigation not only to look for nasty stuff within, she had an ulterior motive in protecting her own ass by means of looking for wherever she was involved, and then using social manipulation by lying to those who weren't looking into the logs themselves, as after all, it was only a small group of people looking into the server, and it was a high probability that the messages she sent could be missed entirely given the sheer amount of information going about. However, Locke caught on to this when interviewing her, and so now that not only the ACC, but the very victims of the FCK knew of Doodles and her deceit, she knew that there was no getting out of this after years of constantly playing these skeevy games with people. On May 23rd, 2024, Doodles would release Finally Doing the Right Thing, a quick 15-minute video admitting her involvement with the FCK and trying to cover it up in the recent leaks. Never mind the thumbnail like she's hanging up the cape in some sort of sad, melancholic way. We're here for the video, in which she admits that she's gonna dip out from the internet after getting caught and plays a short conversation with Locke to wrap things up.
No, but I just hate.
Just breathe.
I just hate how I've been fucking everything up left and right.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to use any of the victims for, like, a shield or as a defense.
But that's still a thing because by the time you left, you told me that you became aware. And that's the problem.
I know what I said in that call, but I panicked.
Unfortunately, that can't be retracted.
I know.
That the damage is done.
I know. And I don't intend to try to undo that damage.
Is there anything else that needs to be stated?
No.
Okay. Well, I wish you well on your endeavors and try to have a better day.
It seemed that this would be the end for Doodletones once and for all, but people were still looking into her to see what other heinous shit she would involve herself in, and, well, let's just say that Doodles and her little hiccup with the FCK was just the tip of the iceberg here. Now, as we know, Doodles is a member of the SCC alongside the ACC, and more specifically, ran a group called the Cloud Palace alongside other members of the SCC. The content these members made were 99% just innocuous, stupid, petty dramas that they would have between one another in their Discord server, but every now and then a story with a bit of substance would pop up and rear its head around the corner. One of those stories has to do with the server member named VigilCO79, a Cloud Palace citizen and somebody who is discovered to be friends with a former Cloud Palace member named V Omega, a member that just so happened to have gotten exposed for being a child predator a while back. Given that V Omega's victims are still part of the Cloud Palace, this was a very bad look indeed, and so in July 2023, Doodletones will upload a video going into this situation for her audience to see. In said video, Doodles explains that this all came to everyone's attention after somebody went to SCC member Pink Robot to tell them about their secret friendship, with the news of course making its way to Doodles as it started to spread around their circles after figuring out it wasn't a random troll trying to cause some chaos. Now, as Doodles was showing these messages on screen for the audience to follow, there's one part where she specifically flashes one on screen for less than half a second, something that is pretty odd when it comes to covering this kind of stuff, but whatever, it must be nothing. She then explains how she didn't know he was friends with the guy and then had a Discord call to talk it out. The thing is, while there really isn't that much going on that's interesting, there is one point where a random member states that he told people Vigil was still friends with V still, but for some reason it seemed that they all forgot about this until the news came to Pink Robot.
I was under the impression most people knew. The thing though is that I did tell people. The people that I did tell though have essentially told me that they just don't remember me saying it to them.
Apparently I was one, but I didn't remember.
No one caught on to this when he said it, but sometimes shit gets missed when talking about so much information, so it's not really a big deal. The rest of the call is basically nothing of interest unless you like seeing a bunch of people yell at each other, but still, seeing how this dude admitted that he already told others in the server, including Doodletones herself, that Vigil was still friends with V, it seemed just so weird why all this even happened to begin with. So, I decided to gather each screenshot that Doodle showed in her video to see if there was anything of interest here, and lo and behold, there indeed was something. Remember that flash of images on screen when Doodles was showing off the DMs? Well, in that one image that appeared for less than half a second, it would turn out that Vigil had admitted to already telling Doodles and others that he was friends with V Omega still, quote, "Didn't you already know I was friends with V for a while? I've been vocal about it, and heck, at some points I told people to not have conversations about V because it made me uncomfortable, even in the Cloud Palace as well." Instead of responding by saying something like, "What the hell are you talking about?" she instead rolls with the conversation and in fact tries to clarify further if he's still friends with the guy, knowing how bad of a look it can reflect on her. Hell, in her video, she tries to frame it as if she was just as shocked as other people when learning about the news, when in reality, she knew about it the whole time and was feigning ignorance to save her own skin.
I relayed what information I could to the rest of the palace, and that's when we learned that some people knew about this, and said nothing.
This means the entire setup going on here pretending she didn't know that Vigil was friends with V Omega still wasn't just to save her own skin, she also wanted easy content for it, hence uploading the video to talk about it on her channel. The craziest part to me is that Doodles would have gotten away with this were it not for the fact that she flashed that screenshot on screen for half a second. All she had to do was just not show that screenshot and she probably would have been fine, but this entire situation was all her own undoing. Oh, but this ain't the only story involving a predator that Doodles will manipulate to fit her narrative, as the next one is easily far worse, because this time instead of just pretending that she didn't know about what was going on, she decided to take things up a notch to a level no one could have ever expected. Now, way back in October 2019, a person by the name of George Raccoon will have a Google Doc written about them exposing him for being a predator by somebody named Charlie, a member of the SCC. In said document, it reveals that this started back in 2017 when George approached a 14-year-old transgender male named Leo, the actual writer of the doc as well, on his NSFW Twitter account when he was 22 years old himself. It's already off to a pretty concerning start, and it would only get worse as Leo will go on to state how he found out pretty quickly that George has a fetish for people wearing Snow White dresses and would draw his friends OCs in Snow White attire sometimes. He tried to do this with Leo soon after meeting him, but a friend of his named Gwen would figure out what George was doing and steer him away from him, and thankfully at the time stop what could have become a bad situation. However, fast forward 2 years later and Leo and Gwen had a falling out, and it just so happened that George would reconnect with them at the age of 24 and 16 apiece. Leo, having it been 2 years and not really understanding what George's intentions were back then and even now, would chat with him about George's fetishes, such as the aforementioned Snow White dress stuff, and most bizarrely, his fetish for magic tricks, something that I found so utterly strange and didn't believe at first until I saw it listed on this image he had pinned in his Twitter bio. Now, George was leading the charge on these messages about his fetishes and was very clearly grooming Leo, and it doesn't get any clearer as he would start to draw him wearing a Snow White dress without even asking first, which is really fucking creepy. George would constantly push his fetishes onto Leo, and I mean constantly, as almost every single conversation revolved around his fetishes in some way, and though he never seemed rude or mean when speaking, we all know grooming when we see it, and this was a prime example of that happening. I mean, he was going as far to try and convince Leo to wear a Snow White dress for Halloween and ask his parents to buy him one. Though in the screenshot he doesn't say he wants a picture from him, it's very likely George probably wanted Leo to snap a pic. He would continue with the magic fetish stuff, and it seemed that things are going to be heading down a very dark direction soon. However, Leo would contact his friend Charlie and tell him about their conversations after getting a weird feeling, in which they realized that George is straight up grooming them without a doubt. So, Leo would go on to cut off George, first by letting him off easy, stating how he unfollowed him on Twitter because he's a minor following an NSFW account and that would be a weird look. George would continue to pry, however, and then Leo would drop the mask and tell him straight up that he makes him uncomfortable after coming to realize what he's been doing, waiting to see how he would react. George would apologize and state that it wasn't his intention to make him uncomfortable, and it seemed that while yes, he was grooming Leo, he might actually be able to turn a new leaf after somebody finally told him how much of a creep he was being. Is what I would be saying were it not for the fact that an hour later, Georgia crashed the fuck out and started to suicide bait on Twitter by changing his username to Gone and his bio very clearly trying to scare Leo back into talking to him by means of emotional trauma. I mean, this post doesn't make it any more clear what his plan was with this, and it was obvious the guy was a piece of shit for even trying this tactic on a 16-year-old when he was in his mid-20s by this point in his life. This blatant attempt at emotional manipulation was initially working, as Leo would end up breaking down in tears while his friends calmed him down for the next 3 hours before eventually going to bed. Just before heading off to sleep, however, Georgia then sent a barrage of DMs trying to get back on the good side of Leo, showing just how utterly insane this man is for doing all this shit to somebody he knew was a teenager. This situation would of course make its way to Doodletones being the queen of the SCC, in which on a livestream dated October 12, 2019, just a few days after the doc dropped, she would try to defend George rather than trash on him for the nasty shit he was doing. And no, I'm not kidding. Doodles will blatantly play hard defense despite the situation being very clear-cut and dry, especially for someone like her who has seen this kind of stuff before.
That's what I think happened. It's just two people met up with each other. Neither necessarily did anything heinous. Both sides are at fault as well. Don't get me wrong, I don't think George is necessarily innocent. He definitely should not have let a minor on his, even if he calls it an NSFW-ish account, he should not have let a minor on there. He just should not have done that. But like, when looking at Leo's document, there's definitely a layer of fault on Leo. And there's definitely some weird things about Leo's document that has me asking so many questions that I don't think I'm literally gonna get any answers for. The more that I read it, I don't think Leo is malicious. I think Leo is overblowing, but I don't think it's malicious.
Needless to say, Doodles would get shat on for this bad take, and so this livestream would initially be lost media until fall 2025, almost 6 years later, after a former friend just happened to remember they had a clip of it when hearing about the mess going on that year. Now, given the stream itself only had 120 views at the time, basically nobody remembered this bad take going down and Doodles getting ready to defend a predator, but she would come back full circle and discuss the situation on her channel almost 2 years later with the video, Can We Please Talk About George Raccoon, uploaded on June 28, 2021. By this point, barely anybody remembered the situation given it was almost 2 years ago, and so Doodles would use people's lack of knowledge to skew a narrative that George was somehow innocent and the situation put against him was overblown by Leo and his associates. For example, Doodles brings up the Snow White dress stuff and how it was a blatant kink he was pushing onto Leo, but then says how because he said it wasn't a kink in that weird list on his Twitter bio that there was no way he was using this to groom Leo.
George's aforementioned rules bulletin explicitly mentions that he doesn't see Snow White as a kink of his. This was established on his NSFW-ish account from the beginning. So for Leo to sit there and believe something that was blatantly against that established descriptor feels kind of sketchy to me. Especially when Leo follows up explaining this to the reader that if you ask George about Snow White being a kink of his, he'd deny it, which always struck me as strange.
Obviously, this is an extremely retarded take because it's pretty easy to read between the lines on this one and figure out that yes, the Snow White dresses are indeed a kink that he was using to groom Leo. There's even a part where Doodles mentions how the messages between George and Leo make it look like Leo is fine with all this by happily replying and such, when like, yeah, duh. Leo didn't realize he was getting groomed until later, and so in hindsight realized how bad it all was. So by putting the blame on the victim by using their prior ignorance against him to defend the perpetrator was also pretty stupid. By this point, it was clear to me that Doodles was very blatantly using people's lack of knowledge to paint George as someone who had false labels put against him by bad actors, but then this is the part where things get wild. Throughout the whole video, Doodles puts up various screenshots and makes her shitty arguments, and in one of those screenshots you can literally see George himself said that he groomed Leo. He literally says it himself right there verbatim when asking if he could make things better, and the fact no one noticed this until 4 years later after the video came out is insane. And to top it all off, around the beginning of the video, Doodles will mention that she's been in contact with George since all this went down, meaning that they were friends.
And as someone who's kept in touch with him for all this time, yes, even he acknowledges in hindsight this was not okay.
I think it's pretty clear what her intentions were when making this video. Doodletones blatantly defended an SCC predator and labeled his child victim as a bad actor so that a friend of hers could be let back into her small community. In fact, DMs had come out from summer 2020 of Doodles talking to George, who had since been going under the name Horace, like any other friend of hers, and seemingly trying to get other members of the Cloud Palace to be open to letting him back in the server, making it even more clear what her intentions were here. This would indeed succeed, as the situation was insanely niche, so very few people with the proper skills to check through the evidence were able to verify the facts, and also because the audience who will watch that kind of video were mostly children that could be easily swayed into the false narrative that Doodles put up by means of obfuscating evidence, extremely stupid defense points, or just straight up lying. However, there was one extra reason why this went unnoticed for so many years, a reason that involves one of the most influential members of the ACC. Sprocket, one of Doodletones' friends, would post a comment of approval on the video when it came out, either because she agreed with the points, was simply doing her friend a favor, or was misled by Doodles herself. However, by posting her seal of approval in the comments, those within the ACC and the SCC, as they have an audience overlap, would further run with the notion that George must have been innocent and was caught up in an overblown situation by bad actors. Whatever Ponder's intentions were, it was clear her approval was an influential reason why no one put together that Doodles manipulated everything in her favor until almost 4 years later. In fact, it was Ponder Sprocket A-Log Akumu, someone who she did dirty a couple of years ago that's not worth getting into right now, who would take notice that she posted said comment of approval on the George Raccoon video on May 20th, 2025 in a Twitter post of his. It just so happened that 12 hours later, 3 comments would disappear off the video, an unlisted video at this point mind you, and one of those missing comments would just so happen to be Ponder's. It's extremely suspicious to see, but I don't want to get sidetracked too much here, so I'll be moving on. Also, some of y'all might be wondering about that Charlie person who made the initial call out. Well, it turns out they would get exposed for their own set of grooming and predator allegations, and in December 2020 would make an apology video basically saying sorry and that they're leaving the internet. It's since been rumored that they killed themselves by setting themselves on fire, though as far as I can tell that is just a rumor going around the internet. Either way, that's one crazy fucking way to go out if true, and in a sad way it's just another example of the crazy shit that goes down in these weird niche corners of the internet. On May 30th, 2025, Loud Convoy will upload a 5-hour video that is basically just a bunch of people getting mad at Doodletones for this new revelation with George and other grievances. It's not exactly interesting in terms of information, and more so is just funny to hear Doodletones get mad and yell at people in Discord.
I know there's nothing I can say that will convince you that this is fucking extortion!
Anywho, the most important piece of information that came from this was that Lyle and others wanted access to Doodle's YouTube channel because she had years worth of archives on the SCC and sought that information to see if there were any other instances of predators roaming free within that community. They didn't want to speak to her ever again after seeing the George stuff, and so all parties agreed that giving the channel to them would be the best way to go about this, with the plan being to switch the Google account attached to it to a fresh and brand new one with no personal information on it. Despite initially agreeing to this plan and was supposedly in the middle of transferring Google accounts, Doodles would end up messaging Lyle a couple days later stating that she deleted her entire channel off YouTube by accident while trying to delete another channel, meaning all that information they wanted was now gone. Her reason for doing so was, quote, "Because you guys said I don't deserve a platform. I just figured if I had nothing to come back to, then you guys would no longer have to worry about me." Yes, instead of saying she doesn't trust Lyle given his past of being a completely deranged man-child, didn't like him, or just wanted to fuck up his plan, Doodles basically says that since she's dipping from the internet and has nothing to come back to, why keep any of her videos online anymore? In my opinion, she did this both as a last-minute fuck you to all her haters and to also hide some more information that could possibly be used against her. Not saying there's anything in specific, but let's be real. If you're going through a bunch of logs, there's a likely chance you'll find something bad given how everything has gone down so far. This would lead to a Discord call that same May 24th day, in which she again says it was all just an accident and eventually had that little crash out we heard earlier. However, there's a little bit more to that side plot with Ponder Sprocket, as she would go on to say that she didn't approve a George Raccoon video that I figure is worth pointing out for the sake of it.
So I have a question regarding the Horus thing. I've been told that when initially asked about the Horus video, you brought me up saying that you ran the situation by me, but when I checked our DMs, what I found was you telling me that, like, you'd brought it up on a stream and you got backlash and asking for feedback. And and I told you that you couldn't then... The issue was that you couldn't put the blame on the victim, only to find out that is what you ended up doing in the video, both in the final product 2 years later, but also behind the scenes leading up to the video's completion.
Mind you, she stated this 3 days after her comment on the video disappeared, a comment that very much implies she saw the video itself, hence why she would back up the video with her own approval to begin with. It's just an odd little side plot going on here that I can't help but mention it, because even though we have no hard evidence the comment was deleted by Ponder as maybe it could have been Doodles herself, the chain of events is fishy enough to mention it before I move on here. Now after this con, once people figured out that Doodles is now AWOL from the internet, one of those mentioned named Truly would go through some DMs she had and notice that Doodles' name was changed from Doodletones to Don Told Stories at some point. It turns out that just days before the call with Laka back in May 2024 when Doodles first left the internet, she made this second alias to continue her social media escapades in secret, and so Truly would of course make a post on Twitter exposing this new identity for people to see. Unfortunately, she didn't archive the account before Doodles locked it, but we still have her brand new Don Told Stories DeviantArt account to go through. The favorites page is what we're here for, in which I would say about half the art is NSFW in nature, with none of it inherently sticking out other than lots of them being more transformation pieces in general. There's also one specific art piece that I've seen people say is a lolicon tentacle stuff, but personally I don't think it's lolicon as it seems it might just be the artist's style instead. Obviously I can't show that to you on screen, but it's still a bit of an iffy case if you ask me. There was some more news that came out during this time as well, such as in July that year when ACC member Rin would accuse Doodles of grooming a 17-year-old at the time named Juniru by sending NSFW Futanari in a group chat when she was 21. The thing is, there's no actual proof she sent the images, as while the messages hint at it, we don't see it happening. On top of that, we don't know the context, as it's possible it was just meant to be a messed up shock joke, so it's hard to pinpoint anything exact going on here. In fact, one of the members of that chat named Luna would be contacted and state that Doodles apparently sent an NSFW drawing of one of her characters as well, though says this message doesn't exist anymore, so there's no evidence of that either. While these situations seem to be a bit iffy at best given the evidence at the time, this next one isn't, as Juniru would make their own video talking about the situation later that year in August. While they cover the Futanari stuff as expected, the second thing they mentioned is what caught my attention more, as it would turn out that Doodletones knew that V Omega, that one predator we mentioned earlier, was drawing NSFW images of Junie whilst knowing they were a minor. In fact, Junie would show a stream clip from years ago of V seemingly threatening them in a flirty tone, and Doodles would chime in herself in it.
Oh, Jonah, whoa. I will make you regret it.
Hashtag
regret it.
Hashtag
Jonah in the pot.
See, the hashtags are not the only thing that Jonah's spreading.
Yes, Doodletones is right there being seen encouraging the grooming of Juniru and apparently knowing they were a minor according to Junie's word. It only gets worse as Doodles would be seen including Junie in various Twitter posts in a flirtatious manner in February 2018, and at this time Doodles would have been 21 herself. While at 21 and 17 years old apiece, Doodles knew that V Omega was grooming Junie, and though I personally disagree with the notion that Doodles was grooming Junie herself, she wasn't putting a stop to it by making similar jokes on that stream or on Twitter. While we technically have no evidence that Doodles knew Junie's age when making these statements, an archive of Junie's Twitter back in November 2020 shows that they put their age in their bio and have continued to do so since then. Given Junie said that Doodles knew their age at the time, and I have no reason to believe they're lying given the evidence they provided in their video, it really does look like she might have known their age and knew what was going on, yet not once put a stop to it despite being old enough to recognize the issues at hand. Forget the Don Told Stories DeviantArt fiasco, this was the biggest new piece of evidence of all, a piece of evidence that shows just how deep the rot within the slideshow commentary community went, all coming straight from the queen on her throne. Now Doodletones here isn't what I would call your typical internet predator. There's no evidence of her directly preying on children because of their age herself at any point here. However, when she would catch wind of a predator being in her SCC circles, she has shown to either not care to do anything, or worst of all, manipulate a narrative in her favor to bring one back right into her community of children as seen with the George Raccoon situation. George was 24 when he self-admittedly groomed a 16-year-old, and the fact Doodletones put her own friendship with George and her want to bring him back into the SCC under his new identity Horace over keeping him away from her circles that have children in them despite knowing how disgusting he is says enough here. To put it quite simply, Doodles put her own personal interests ahead of her community, interests that in this specific case feature predators and child groomers and not something simple like someone being a bit too edgy in chat or some hot political takes, and whenever she found a way to try and skew things in her favor, she would take that chance immediately. It's why she joined the FCK investigation. She knew there was stuff that could make her look bad and so sought out to get ahead of that curve. It's just that she wasn't able to do so as the evidence was stacked against her. It's why she manipulated the situation around George Raccoon. He was her friend, and so years after everyone forgot about the finer details, she made her snaky video and likely had Pondersprocket give her approval as a way to further her goal of letting him back into the SCC. There's always times where situations like these can get messy and confusing and even blown out of proportion by bad actors looking to slander your name or start shit, but the evidence for the most damning claims we've seen today is pretty clear. Something that's just so sad though is that it's pretty easy to tell Doodles has been a lost cause since she was a kid, as after all, she was in her early to mid-teens when she found DeviantArt and was led down this degenerate path in life. I mean, for fuck's sake, you saw how deep in the diaper lover brain rot tunnel she was in and how in denial she was that it was her fetish for around a decade? And it's shit like this that makes me sad because there are probably many other people like her who started off as any young normal kid who were exposed to this nasty stuff and ended up becoming the very people they are. I mean, dude, Doodletones had a character she made way back during her time chatting with Alex named Mika, a 6-year-old girl who was made specifically for fetish roleplay purposes, as you can see right there on your screen. It's shit like this that casts such a solemn shadow across this whole story because you know there was no chance for this person once they went down this path, but at least her reign of terror seems to be over for now. Shout out to my channel members for helping support my content, and shout out to my bestie tier members Nami, Cody, Laura Hertzman, Cheems, Cult of Mystical, Hyper AKV, and Trendy Dragon. Go check out my Patreon and YouTube memberships if you want to support me yourself in the description below, and I hope you join as soon as you can. Also, feel free to go check out my second channel as well. I've been trying to get it running, so we'll see how it goes throughout the summer and the future. This feels like such a strange ending for me going on here because while researching this video, I knew of Doodletones from way back when Medicare dropped his video on her, and so seeing her head pop around the ACC corners was so bizarre as I assumed she just fucked off to her diaper-loving degenerate corner of the internet. But no, she stuck around like shit on a wall and somehow became a notable figure in the ACC up until its downfall, and the only reason none of this stuff was found out any sooner was because of her tight hold under smaller SCC circles and because of her influential friendships. It makes me wonder just how much stuff she has in her archives after she deleted her YouTube channel, because after everything we've seen today, there's a lingering notion that there's still a little bit more to be discovered that is simply locked away on her hard drive now.